are a number of games on the NES that transcend their bits and pixels and become legendary well beyond the sum of their parts. Ghosts and Goblins is one such game. Ported over from arcades in 1986, Ghosts and Goblins is stylistically simple and thematically goofy. It's a 2D action platformer where the world is filled with zombies, goblins, and flying devils, yet the hero marches around comically in his underwear, chucking oversized javelins at the beings who haunt him in order to survive. Players were drawn to Ghosts and Goblins in the arcades, making it a major hit in the mid-80s, and many still love it to this day. The NES port reviewed quite well at the time, despite how brutal the game can be to the casual player, and it still charts on best of lists for the system. Fans are able to overlook its countless frustrations simply to say they've slayed this highly challenging beast, an accomplishment worthy of being etched on one's own tombstone. The Ghosts and Goblins series is long-lived, with numerous sequels and spin-offs over the years, leading up to the most recent Ghosts and Goblins Resurrection that harkens back to the series' roots by capturing the old-fashioned 2D difficulty in all its splendid glory. Today, we're going to take a closer look at where it all started, on home ports anyway, with the NES's Ghosts and Goblins. Let's see what's up. Setting out to review this game, I knew I had to beat it proper. Plugging around in a few levels with save states or stopping short of a complete victory would not capture the essence of what makes this game, I guess you could say special. So with lots of late-night practice that included screaming into a pillow, stomping around in circles, cursing the gods of RNG, and feeling immense regret for what I had chosen to do, I finally broke through and did it. It's pretty well known in retro gaming circles that this game has the sense of humor of an underpaid executioner. When you get to the end, and you'll think it's the end because of the map, and you'll know the map well because you're forced to look at it each and every time you die, and you will die so much, my friend. So anyway, when you get to the end, you're bluntly told it is not the end. You must suffer through it all again to achieve the proper ending. This requires starting the game over again, and while that's grueling enough on its own, let me be the first to tell you, since this part is often understated, the second run-through is harder. But we'll get to that. First, if you've never had the pleasure of trying this one, you're a knight named Sir Arthur, and there is a damsel in distress. It's all on you, pal. You start out in your full knight gear, but if you take a hit, boom, now you're in your Fruit of the Looms. Take another hit while you're skipping around in your underloons, and you die. So you have 2 hits per life. You can find armor out in the wild, but it's all cryptically hidden and requires you to jump or duck at specific spots to spawn it. You get to spend 3 lives before getting a game over, and there are no extra lives, but there are infinite continues. On top of infinite continues, 4 of the 6 levels have checkpoints that you start over at when you die, and when you die, even if you use a continue, you'll start back at the checkpoint with the last weapon you had. Death is not too punishing in this game. It is not a serious setback at all, really. It's just often. And the most punishing thing about it is that you're forced to look at the map that marks your progress, or lack thereof, before you can play again. You'll see this map a lot. Also, when you do get a game over, you need to carefully go down and select Continue, because the game defaults your selection to the one-player option that starts the game all over again, erasing all your progress if you choose it. So if you're frustratingly button-mashing through here to get going again, you might have a bad time. Now, if you've not played this and you're thirsting to beat a tough game, you just heard infinite continues and light punishment for dying and thought, how hard could this be? Well, let me tell you, this might be one of the most challenging games despite how kind it is. Even with infinite continues, caffeine, practice, and a lucky horseshoe hanging out of the side of your head, this one still manages to be a bear for 2 main reasons. The first is randomization. While the enemies you encounter will be roughly in the same place each time, there are 2 types of enemies, we'll say. There are set enemies in that they are already spawned when you get to them. They behave randomly in that you'll never know where they'll move, or how they'll react to your attacks, but you can expect them to be waiting for you each time you get to them. Then, there are out-of-thin-air enemies, and these teeter between spawning in the exact same spot each time, or just whenever and wherever they feel like it. The enemy most guilty of randomly appearing and surprise murdering you is the flying burritos, who will pop out of thin air directly in your path and derail your success. So, if you want to use save states to practice certain areas, know that doing so will only get you so far. The next time you go through that area, the enemies will probably do something a little bit different, enough to throw you off your rhythm, especially later in the game. It's good to practice to know what could lie ahead, but unlike something like Ninja Gaiden or Contra, memorization can't do it all for you. The second challenging element is the cryptic or completely unsaid bits, like how the armor is hidden around. You'll also need to know that a specific weapon is required in order to defeat the final boss, and that weapon, the shield, sucks for almost every enemy except the final boss. And remember, if you pick up a weapon, thankfully you don't lose it when you die. Except, it sucks when you have to get the shield, then you die with the shield, and then you are stuck with the shield. You may be familiar with how revered the dagger or knife is in this game. And it's true, that weapon rules. And good news for you, you can farm it. There are 2 places I farmed it, the first stage so that I could have it from the get-go, and the next to last stage where I often lost it the most often thanks to having to pick up the freaking shield. If you don't pick up the shield before fighting the final boss, you'll have to repeat the last couple levels over, so just do it. It's a mean way to learn a lesson, and the people who develop this game don't like you or care about your feelings. The game also has some platforming, and boy is it not great. Jumping in general isn't great. Sir Arthur has a set jump arc and can't be manipulated in the air. But the platforming isn't the real run stopper here. For most folks, it's going to be these red devils. They're hateful, and to challenge them requires some quick reflexes and good timing. For most of them, you need to retreat while they're in the air and jump away from them when they swoop down at you, and then turn and attack them in midair. It takes practice, but this works well when you and the Red Devils are on the same plane. Unfortunately, Capcom knew this, and because they wanted everyone to suffer, most of the Red Devils in this game are at a higher elevation, requiring you to be a little lucky in addition to skilled. There are countless videos out there providing tips for how to get through this one. You can find tricks for despawning the dastardly Red Devils, the best routes to take to avoid the most enemies, and so forth, but ultimately it comes down to just doing it until you get it. Memorization will only get you so far in this game that's littered with cheap enemies and cheaper weapon placement. Seriously, they really want you to lose the weapon you have by placing ones you don't want on or near stairways that you have to take. The hit detection is suspect at times, and there are a few areas where sometimes a rogue projectile from an enemy can hit you and you won't see it. The music, while iconic, does wear itself thin, and the reward for beating the game, which, by the way, the bosses in the game are never as tough as the rest of the levels, the reward is a typo-laden congratulations screen that doesn't hang around long enough to enjoy before spitting you back out to the main menu to try the whole game over again. And if you earn your way to that second and final run, you may be cocky. Hey, you just beat Ghosts and Goblins. Sort of. You stud. You've done it once, surely you can do it again. But note, in the second campaign, the projectiles the enemies shoot at you are now faster. The enemies themselves are faster. And maybe I'm conspiratorial, but I also think the enemies are a lot smarter than you the second time too. It helps that you were skilled enough to get through it once. And if you did, then yes, you can do it again, but be ready to discover some areas that were only a small problem the first time are now a little more of a challenge the second time. Good luck. I've not played the arcade version, or any of the many other ports or sequels. From what I understand, the NES and arcade versions are constructed the same, outside of the graphics and sound. And ultimately, my thoughts on this one are conflicted. It's one that feels like a real achievement to complete. I've already added it to my resume in 2 different sections. But it's tough to recommend to anyone other than those who are looking for a steep and sometimes unfair challenge. And for some reason, this game is 2 players, but good luck finding or keeping a friend around after an afternoon date with this one. Well, that's going to do it for Ghosts and Goblins on the NES. As always, get the knife! Thanks for watching.